Mississippi.
From the Foundation Studio right here on Biloxi's Back Bay, I want to welcome you to Super Talk Outdoors, where we celebrate every single Monday at lunchtime the world-class outdoors of the state of Mississippi, because as I say every week, we are the capital of the outdoors in America. I wonder if you're saying that now, or if you believe it. I think if you live in Mississippi, you know it and you believe it. But let's proclaim from the highest mountaintops that we're the capital of the outdoors in America. I want to thank you for joining us on the powerful SuperTalk Mississippi Radio Network, or on SuperTalk TV at C Spire TV. But some of you are watching the show on YouTube or Facebook, or you're listening on your favorite podcast. And if that's the case, it's June the 26th, 2023. I want to especially thank the Foundation, the title sponsor of SuperTalk Outdoors. The Foundation is focused on important issues about protecting Mississippi's outdoors heritage. A lot of responsibility comes with that. And the second half of the show, I want to remind you about our one-of-a-kind raffle that's now underway at the Foundation. By the way, my views on this show are mine, not those of the Foundation. When it comes to the outdoors or outdoors issues, you can count on me to say what needs to be said when it comes to conservation and outdoors enjoyment in Mississippi. And I'm honored to be in this position. We had a really good day of fishing over yesterday, actually, offshore in Mississippi waters. Spanish mackerel and king mackerel, some beautiful snapper. We even caught a nice cobia. My son Jordan and I took my brother-in-law Peter and his sons, Peter Jr. and Nico, out. We actually had planned to run deep into to the southeast looking for mahi-mahi. But a serious thunderstorm sort of lingered offshore, and it forced us to fish a little bit shallower. But that actually turned out to be a bit of divine intervention, because it was incredible everywhere we went. It was another amazing reminder of why Mississippi is the capital of the outdoors in America. Hey, I want to mention something really important to you. The Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks Commission made another puzzling move regarding chronic wasting disease last week at the commission meeting. You can actually watch that meeting on YouTube. Just do a search of Commission for Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks, and you'll see the most recent meeting there on YouTube. On a motion made by Commissioner Gary Rhodes, he's the mayor of Flowood, who was appointed by Governor Reeves. They voted once again to change CWD policy, the plan as it relates to CWD, without public or department specialist input and without any discussion. This is the third time in the last year that they've changed the approach to CWD management geographically without public input and without a scientific foundation for the change. I don't want to focus too much on the specific change that they voted to make. We'll do that, a lot more of that in the future show. But I wanted to focus for a second on the process and the regret that we're going to feel in the future if we don't pay closer attention to this issue. But let me give you a little bit of background. This is from the Mississippi State website. Bronson Strickland, a wildlife specialist with Mississippi State University Extension, said CWD is dangerously different from other diseases that affect deer. He said this: other devastating diseases of deer have a disease cycle endpoint, such as, say, the arrival of cold weather, Strickland said. That does not happen with CWD, as the disease slowly kills the individual deer, and it takes time to move through the area's population. The Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks, which regulates wildlife hunting in Mississippi, began looking for CWD among the state's deer. The first positive case was in the state was detected on February of 2018 in Issaquah County. Since then, CWD continues to spread. Infection rates in other states have shown that the disease does not go away and spreads widely if left unmanaged. There is no known cure for CWD. If ignored, the disease will reach the point of no return in localized areas, Strickland said. Our goal is to keep CWD at a low prevalence in Mississippi. William McKinley, director of the deer program for the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks, said CWD is easily transmittable to deer through saliva, feces, urine, or a contaminated environment. The amount of positive material needed to infect deer 100% of the time is the size of one very fine grain of sand. Conditions are right for CWD spread when an infected deer congregates with other deer in a small area, such as a salt lick or a feeder, McKinley said. Because the disease transmits so easily, we urge hunters and wildlife managers to lower deer density and eliminate practices that encourage deer to congregate. Again, all of that from the Mississippi State website. So the threat of CWD prompted the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks to develop a very comprehensive CWD plan. It is an incredibly focused plan adopted by a prior commission. Here's something from the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks website. Once a disease occurs in an area, evidence demonstrates eradication is unlikely. Management of the chronic wasting disease requires a long-term adaptive management approach that will be refined through new science and information. That's directly from the department website. Noted professionals have actually said here on SuperTalk Outdoors that CWD is the single biggest threat to white-tailed deer hunting in America. It's therefore the biggest single threat to deer hunting in Mississippi. The impact of the spread of CWD, the impact the spread of CWD could have on the outdoors economy in Mississippi could be devastating. So you would think any change of the CWD management plan by the commission would involve science, input from the department specialists, and extreme and careful deliberation, not a whim, on a resolution that passed without comment or public or department specialists input. Wow. You know, we've got to get smarter about this, and we will look back with significant regret that we didn't pay closer attention. I don't know the right answers. I honestly don't. I've read everything I could about CWD, but I do know we better get focused. We've got to take the comprehensive CWD plan adopted by the commission way more seriously. So with that said, let me shift gears now and move over and welcome my friend, somebody I really enjoy checking in with, to SuperTalk Outdoors, Anthony Ballard. How you doing, buddy?
Man, if I was any better, I couldn't stand it. How are you, Ricky?
I'm doing great. Listen, Anthony is with the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks. We've had a lot of conversations about his nuisance specialist biologist experience, but more recently, he's seriously into the bear population in Mississippi, and so it's always good to check in with him. As I mentioned to you, Anthony, before we started the show, on the farm I lease in Shula, on some adjoining land, not far from where our farm is located, someone sent a picture of a really nice big black bear that was I'm assuming probably just roaming through, but I'm hearing that more recently. You mentioned before the show it's you would expect that this time of year. What's going on at this moment in time?
Well, I mean, you can kind of equate this to sort of the pre-rut, if you will, for white-tailed deer, for instance. The breeding season for bears kind of tops out right there around July, and so you right here at this point, you've got the adult sows that have most of them, if not all of them, have kicked those yearlings out. So you've got a lot of younger males that are kind of dispersing and finding their way for the first time. And then you've also got a pretty big mix-up because there's males that are covering large distances looking for females in heat and kind of getting ready to start all that, kick that breeding season off. So there's a lot of movement this time of year, a lot of mixing around, and therefore a lot more sightings as well.
Well, what's interesting, as you and I have talked about before, people as a general rule, now maybe up in the northeast part of the Mississippi, once you get into the hills and that area, as a general rule, you didn't think of bears in Mississippi, but we've done a really good job of over the many years actually helping that population come back. It's a pretty good big success story, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's actually something that I want to bring more. A lot of people don't know, number one, that we have bears in Mississippi at all, but number two, that the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries have been doing bear work since 2003. And so you've got, a couple decades worth of research here. So one of my goals is to kind of bring more light to that, more awareness, and then, to sort of help people as that population continues to grow, to live with bears, to mitigate conflicts and all the things that kind of goes along with that.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about the bear hair snare project on the other side after we go to break. But that picture that any person gets this time of year, what's the possible range that of the deer that they get on camera?
So it could be, like I said, a lot of times it's those young males that you get that turn up in unexpected places. We've got one bear that we collared in Wilkinson County that is about 65 miles away from where we originally collared him from. So he was collared back in the middle part of May, and he's now, like I said, almost 70 miles from where his original collar location was, and that's a good example of a young male just heading out somewhere and kind of deciding where he's going to go and end up somewhere really far away and being seen by a lot of people too. We've gotten pictures of that same bear sort of as he's progressed on his journey, so it's been pretty cool.
That is so interesting. Actually, how many collared bear do you have out there presently?
Right now we have 9. We have several in the South Delta. That's kind of been sort of the breadbasket of bear research. That population there. We've got several in Bolivar, and then now we've got one in Wilkinson.
Excellent. Hey, when we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation about bear. I'm fascinated. I know you are too with bear in Mississippi, but we'll talk about the Bear Hair Snare Project with the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks biologist Anthony Ballard. We'll see you after this break.
Carry on, Mississippi.
Leading the conversation on Mississippi's outdoors. It's Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk Mississippi.
Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. I have my friend Anthony Ballard from the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks. He's a biologist, and he more recently is really focusing his attention on black bear. He's also a nuisance specialist, and certainly there's a lot to talk about there as well. Hey, Anthony, I think about offshore fishing, and people who go deep want to know where the blue water is. So there are apps that we can look at that gives us satellite views of where the blue water is as opposed to the green water and so on. But there are apps that do other things that we just pay a lot of attention to. I'm thinking about you and those non-collared bear. Is there an app that you go to be able to know where those bear are at any given time?
Well, it's not necessarily an app. So the way that those collars are programmed is they update every 4 days. They'll have a collection of points that they send via satellite. And so assuming that those collars are getting satellite reception, then we get those points sort of in batches rather than just kind of a real-time update. But the way we find them during den season is they also emit a VHF frequency that we can find with an antenna. And so we find those if we really don't know where they are because the collar's malfunctioning or doesn't have service, we can find those with an airplane and then kind of zero in from there. Or if we know about where they are, we can go on site and use directional antennas to find where those bears are.
Oh, that's so interesting. And as a biologist who's doing research specifically around how bear are traveling, et cetera, is it something that gives you a lot of satisfaction to look at, where's that bear today?
Yeah, it's kind of like a Christmas present opening up every time those collars update, because you just never know. You may have a cluster of points that are all right there together, or you may have one that's strung over, 50 miles or so. You just really never know. So it's always interesting to see, especially the differences between the males and females and how they're moving this time of year. It really kind of peels back the layers of the daily life of a bear, I guess.
You mentioned about the lower delta sort of being the breadbasket of your research. Is that for a specific reason, or really bears just kind of dispersed all through the state?
Well, you have several core populations, I guess several core areas, the South Delta being one. So you look at populations from other states. Most of the bears we have here in the state came from either Louisiana or parts of Arkansas or Alabama. And so there's been sort of a natural egress, or I guess that would be ingress, from the Tensas Parish, which is very densely populated. You've got the Arkansas White River area up there that have had a lot of spillover into areas like Bolivar County. And then the Mobile Basin actually has a lot of bears as well that has kind of, floated on into those coastal counties. And so, and then kind of the Southwest, there's a pile down there. So really, I guess as a generality, along the Mississippi River and then along those drainages on the western part of the state, and then the coastal counties are probably the most densely populated.
Okay, so what is the Bear Hair Snare Project?
So we have basically 2 different projects going on right now, sort of simultaneously. We have one where we're trapping and collaring bears in southwest Mississippi. I mentioned Wilkinson County several times. We're putting GPS collars there and and looking at the positions of those. We're hoping to get about 10 out this summer. And then we also have the hair snare project, which is basically any private land, public land, any other, timber company land, a lot of it, that we're putting out hair snares. And what those are is it's either around a few trees or around T-posts that we'll put strands of barbed wire. And so when the bear goes in to get that bait on the inside, it'll snag a small tuft of hair, and then we send that off for DNA analysis. And so all of this is in an effort to sort of reconstruct what the population looks like, what the density might be. And, our overall goal is to get, when people say, the first question I always get, how many bears do we have, that will have a lot more updated and informed answer about that.
So do you've got a lot of nuisance animal experience. Has there been a deer in Mississippi been identified as a nuisance bear?
So I kind of hesitate to use the term nuisance bear because, you put a nose on an animal that's 7 times better than a dog. You leave your trash out the road or leave, some kind of food source unsecured and then expect them not to find their way to it. And so I think it's kind of unfair to call them a nuisance bear because, really they're just trying to seek out calories and make a living as a bear. But that does bring me to a good point. Another thing we're trying to stress as far as people living with bears is to do things like securing trash, taking it out the morning of instead of the night before, pet foods, bird feeders, barbecue grills, anything that a dog will get into, a bear will. And as we have more and more bears in the population and, coming into more populated areas, it's going to be more and more of a concern. And so we're trying to get the word out and kind of get out in front of that as far as a messaging perspective to kind of reduce conflict as we can.
How often do you get calls? It'd be interesting because for people who are not clued into the conversation you and I are having, they might think seeing a bear in Mississippi is extraordinarily abnormal. So they call you and say, "You're not going to believe what I saw. I saw a bear." How often does that happen?
Well, it just kind of really depends on the area of the state. We have some areas like in the deer camps in the Bachelor Land and South Delta. They see bears so often that they don't call anybody. It's just similar to seeing a deer or a mockingbird or anything else. It's just really not a big deal. But then, Pike County, for instance, was one that was in the news several weeks ago. There was one in Indianola, one that swam up on the beach in Destin, Florida. Obviously those are pretty big news and something that makes a lot of headlines. So it really just kind of depends on the area.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting because for those of us on social media, we knew about that bear in Destin almost immediately because that word traveled quickly. But then it finally hit the press and then got to our friends who are not on social media. And 2 days later, they send notes out. You're not going to believe what happened in Destin. It's kind of funny, the gap between the two. But that was so interesting because of where it came out onto the beach and then into the water. Ultimately, was in a pretty populated area, and here's this bear swimming amongst the tourists. It was just such an odd occurrence.
Yeah, it really was, and that's kind of going back to that. Most likely that was a young male as well, and they just start to roam, and just sort of like a yearling deer, that really can show up in odd places or odd times. They're just trying to find a place to keep from getting whipped by a bigger bear and sort of establish a home range, and it can put them in some headlines, throughout the U.S. really.
That is so interesting. Hey, anything else you want to say about bear before we shift gears?
Thank you to all the landowners that have participated in our project. That's going really well. If you hadn't received a call, it doesn't mean you won't. And so we appreciate everybody that's reported bears. And again, go to our website. We have some really good information about avoiding conflict there.
Anthony, I bet you are really enjoying this new gig.
I love it. I love it.
So whether it's taking a picture with a tranquilized bear that you're about to put a collar on or whatever, it's always fun to get into a new area, isn't it?
It really is. Yeah, I've learned a lot. And I tell people I kind of jumped on a moving treadmill here with this bear project, but kind of got my feet under me and gotten a few collars out and learned a whole lot along the way. So it's been a really good transition. I'm glad to be where I am.
Hey, listen, we got a very short period of time left, but for people who are worried about hog population in Mississippi, it's an incredibly resilient population. We got to stay on top of it, don't we?
Absolutely. Yeah. And we know that trapping is the best option for that. And so we've got a lot of good options for there. We got some good information on the website. And so go there and learn more about it.
I mentioned to you that I killed a hog on one of the farms I leased at the beginning of deer season last year. We were getting them on camera pretty regularly, and there's one on the corner of this property. I went there because it's one of our best deer hunting spots, and sure enough, they all came out. I shot one of them, and then the others ran in every direction, and then we didn't see them again. So we got lucky in that case, didn't we?
Yeah, and that's that's what happens a lot of the times is you have people that prefer to go out and shoot them, and while that is a lot of fun, and I enjoy it myself, from a management perspective, it's a lot better to get that whole group you were talking about, to get them trapped all at once, and that way you're actually making some headway.
And there were a couple of huge sows in that group, but that's usually that's the case. One or two big sows and some boars, and they may just kind of go together, and boy, they can do some damage.
Yeah, and in a very short amount of time.
It's incredible to just bore up the property. But most most are very familiar with what happens when a group of wild hogs come through. I mean, there's just no mistaking what has just happened, and they hate when they see it because they know that probably means we're going to have a challenge on our hands. And of course, the more land you have, the more potentially the more challenge that you're going to have. And you got to stay on top of it. The one thing that I learned from you is that with the new technology as it relates to trapping and the way that the trapping devices are can be triggered, it really makes trapping hogs a lot more efficient than it used to be, isn't it?
Yeah, it gives you a level of control that you just can't get anywhere else. And we've actually used that technology to trap and collar a couple bears here recently, so it's been working out really well.
That's cool to hear that too. Hey, listen, Anthony, it's been a pleasure to catch up with you, my friend.
Always a pleasure. Yes, sir.
We'll look forward to talking to you again soon. But this has been Anthony Ballard from the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks. He's a biologist who specializes these days in bears. Hey, when we come back, we're going to talk to our friend Houston Havens. Always enjoy checking in with him to talk about what goes on about waterfowl during the summertime. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. As I mentioned during the first part of the show, the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks Foundation has a one-of-a-kind raffle that's underway as we speak. And the money is going to be used to go toward really important projects the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks wants to do. Occasionally, they'll do a project not affiliated with the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks, but really, really good stuff. There are 5 incredible prizes: a $50,000 Ford vehicle voucher, a Legends hunt with Cuz Strickland, my friend Cuz, and Preston Pittman, an Argentina dove hunt for 8, a 10-day guided African safari, or the ultimate outdoors package are among the amazing items that you can win. Tickets are $20 each. You can get 3 for $50, 10 for $100, 25 tickets for $150. You can best way to find it is do the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks, or just say Wildlife Foundation Mississippi raffle, and you'll find information about it and learn how to purchase the ticket. You have until the end of July to purchase the ticket, and then the drawing is going to be held on August the 14th at the Mississippi Museum of Natural Science. So get your tickets today. I think you'll be glad you did, and you'll be making a great and valuable contribution to wildlife conservation in Mississippi. So now let me shift gears. I always enjoy spending time with my friend Houston Havens. I had the opportunity to actually see him in person during deer season. We bumped into each other, but he's head of the waterfowl program for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks. And as we always say this time of year, there's no rest for the weary in Houston's world. So how you doing, my friend?
Doing well. Good to talk with you again.
It's good to see you too. Where are you at right now?
I'm in our Jackson office.
Good. I know you have to go into the office like everybody has to from time to time, but you like being out in the field, don't you?
That's right. It's a good time of year to be out in the field. Of course, like you said, there's plenty of office work that goes along with most jobs, and so we get our fair share of that. But it's a great time of year to get out on public and private lands, helping to manage wetland habitat.
Hey, I was thrilled. Actually, in my conversation with Ricky Flint last week, actually, we went through some of the projects from the Department of Wildlife, the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund. that we all worked so hard to get. Legislature signed, the governor signed it, and now the first allotment of money has gone out to projects. I loved that one of the projects was in partnership with Ducks Unlimited on public land. It's great to have that inflow of money. We that money creates opportunities for us that we would not have otherwise had. You got to be excited about that.
Absolutely. Ducks Unlimited has been a great partner on wetland habitat across the state of Mississippi and across the country. And so we're looking forward to getting, putting those funds to work and doing some improvements on public lands that hunters will be able to show up and see and enjoy later on.
Listen, as you and I talked about, we can debate all day long about has the migration patterns changed? What impact does the warmer weather have? What impact does creating so much farmland in areas that might have been wetland or near wetland? I mean, we can have all those debates we want, but at the end of the day, the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks and the wildlife management areas that they have set aside for duck hunting, when others don't have ducks, some of these wildlife management areas have ducks, and it's because they've very consistently worked to improve the habitat and create food sources and all that. So, coming to summertime, you guys have a lot of work to do in the summertime to keep that. You've been batting 1,000 in the wildlife management areas, but to keep that up, you got to work hard, don't you?
That's right, and it's it's about what Mother Nature provides for you. If you've got some opportunity, especially when you're talking about wetlands, there's a lot of mechanical work that has to be done in those areas to maintain them in the state that we want them in, and you don't always get opportunities every year. So when you do get opportunities like we have this summer in a lot of areas, we've got to really be busy, and this time of year is the time to do it.
Hey, listen, we talked during the turkey season, not you and I, but others and I have talked that the spring was more normal. We didn't have, we had some cool mornings and some warm days and some rain, but not too much. And it really was, it felt kind of normal during the turkey season. But since then, it's, the weather's been kind of weird, hasn't it? I mean, we've had these fronts and lots of rain and lots of dry moments, and now we've got a heat dome that's supposed to be settling into the southeast. What's your read on the weather currently and how it might impact or not, or just how it might impact duck season?
Well, like you said, it all plays into it. Weather that we're getting right now is going to impact what we can do management capability-wise for producing duck food later on this fall and winter. This spring was pretty good as far as not being too, extreme on one end or the other. But this weather that we've been having lately, of course, we need some summer rains to keep things going. This is our growing season in Mississippi right now, and those are important. But we'd rather not have the extreme wind and flooding events and hail, things like that have come along with that.
Yeah, I can through my friend, the Dunn family, who we lease farms from, I can talk to Travis. We talk once or twice a week just to stay in touch, and you can tell how the weather is based on whether he's out getting ready to water or not. And for large farm operations, that's quite an undertaking. And so he's had periodic moments where he's had to get out there and start the irrigation process. But that's kind of the way it's been. It's been kind of feast or famine across the state, hasn't it?
It really has, and there's areas that are getting too much rain, and kind of like the North Delta area has been getting it pretty consistently. And then you talk to others in the South Delta, it's never uniform across. There's always somebody that's having an issue on one side or the other.
So if I were to sit down with you and go over your plan, your management plan, and talking specifically about summer activities and to-do items that are part of your plan, what's that list look like?
So I would start by talking about moist soil management. It's something that we recommend landowners do on their own properties. We do it on wildlife management areas as a large portion of our overall wetland management strategy. And what we're talking about there is working with natural plants that are in the seed bank in most wetland low-lying areas, and just working with those, trying to produce annual seeds, annual plants that are going to be beneficial for waterfowl foods later on this fall and winter. And so that's not to say that it's because it's in the seed bank, you can just let it go and just show up and put water on it in the fall and have a good duck season. It does work that way in some cases, but there's also a lot of monitoring and a lot of hands-on management that goes on there. So especially late June, early July, like we're in right now, monitoring is a key point. We talk with landowners and we visit with landowners, helping them to identify what they've got going on there, because what we're trying to help them avoid is going in and getting in a planting mentality when they don't necessarily have to. We see a lot of times where someone may go in and have a really good start to producing really good waterfowl food, but because they don't know what it is or they don't really trust what it is, then they want to, disc it up and try to plant something. And then, as Mississippi weather, just like we talked about, sometimes we can fall into an extreme drought and, what you've planted doesn't really produce like you wanted it to, and that can kind of work against you.
Yeah, yes, it's so interesting because if you don't have irrigation capabilities and you go in and do what you just talked about, go ahead and disc it up. Even though once you close the openings to the pond or whatever it is you're trying to do, and start to gather water, it's like farmland basically at that point. So it's really you're relegating your success to whatever the weather is going to do, especially if you don't have irrigation capabilities. So, I would say 50% of the time you're probably going to fail. 50% of the time. So if you could have natural capabilities, you really want that, don't you?
Absolutely. Those natural plants are, a little more hardy. They're adapted to kind of handle those swings in different environmental conditions. And so, we always recommend managing for diversity. Again, we do that on our wildlife management areas. We're going to do some kind of plantings for waterfowl, both for the hunter side and for the waterfowl side of it. And it's just a good overall strategy of having a diversification in the types of foods that you're managing. That way, you can get some dry weather or a little bit of wet weather, and it's not going to totally dictate your whole effort there. You can have some areas that are going to do better than others if you do a little diversification on the front end during the summertime.
So what I see in the places where I go, usually in fact, all of the cases that I'm engaged in, there's a farmer involved. So anything from corn to soybeans to wild capability. I mean, you see a wide range of efforts to try to draw the ducks in, don't you?
We do. A lot of the landowners that we're working with, or maybe even leaseholders that we're working with, like you said, are working with the farmer. And of course, that's the farmer's livelihood. And we understand that they're doing it to make a crop and, produce a crop at the end of the year. But there are still a lot of areas that have that wetland infrastructure built into those field systems. They can put water on those and provide some really good waterfowl habitat on those areas as well.
Yeah, sheet water in the right scenario is pretty awesome, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, you gotta have water to attract birds. They're going to use those wetlands not just for food. Of course, we'd like to manage food underneath that water to be able to provide as much as we can for the ducks that are going to be here throughout the wintertime. But yeah, just having water, sheet water in large amounts can really pull a lot of birds and make them kind of settle in and then use an area in a surrounding environment.
So listen, we're coming to the end of the segment together, but when we get on the other side, I'm curious about what you're learning as you stay in touch with people who do what you do around the country. What are you hearing from folks? And, what kind of new things are being talked about and thought about? When we come back on the other side with my friend Houston Havens, we'll continue the conversation about ducks in Mississippi. We'll see you after this.
I breathe Mississippi till I'm dead and gone. Just carry on. I'll carry on. Mississippi.
We live in one of the best places in America to enjoy the outdoors. So let's talk about it. It's Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk Mississippi.
Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. I always enjoy spending time with my friend Houston Havens. In fact, to be honest with you, all the department employees are so dedicated. I mean, I say it a lot on this show that they each have dedicated their lives so that we can generationally enjoy the outdoors in Mississippi. And because of the work they're doing, we can say that we're the capital of the outdoors in America. So duck hunting is a really favorite pastime for so many Mississippians, whether you do it on private land or whether you do it on public land. And Houston Havens and his team were sort of the brain power behind, giving advice to private landowners and working hard within the WMAs to make sure they're the best they can be. When you're talking to your brethren in other states, what do the conversations look like these days?
Well, this time of year especially, it's the conversation is about breeding habitat. So obviously, if you're a waterfowl hunter, you know that most of the ducks that we're going to have here in Mississippi later on this fall and winter are not here right now. They're in the prairie pothole regions of the Dakotas and Canadas, up in the boreal forest, depending on the species. And so we have to be concerned about those habitats. We have to take care of birds when they're not here and when they're here. And so Mississippi is a very fortunate state to be in a situation where we have a state waterfowl stamp. If you're 16 years or older, it's required to hunt waterfowl in Mississippi. And so we're able to use those funds, obviously here in the state, working on wildlife management areas and working with private landowners as well. But we also use some of that funding for breeding habitat. And, that can be in the form of conservation easements or, other programs on areas in the prairies that are producing the ducks that are going to be coming here in Mississippi. We know that through banding efforts that are done in other states as well as here, where birds that are using Mississippi are nesting during this time of year, where they're coming from, where the production is going on. And so we're able to really take care of them in a year-round sense more than just here in the winter.
How's it looking up there?
It's looking better. We had some real challenges the last couple of years. Still too early to tell, but as far as nesting habitat, things were in better condition in key areas like the eastern side of the Dakotas, into southern Saskatchewan and Manitoba. Those key areas that are important for birds that are produced and coming to Mississippi most years. There's a long way to go for ducks. They've got to have those good nesting conditions, which we're kind of have good indications that they did have early in the season. And then they've got to raise broods. They've got to have good wetland conditions, good feeding conditions to be able to get those broods recruited into the population that's going to be what we call the fall flight, that's going to be making their way in a few months back down south.
You talked about the stamp and how important that is. And man, I get it, because the ability to capture data, what gets measured gets done. When you look at the stamp purchases over the last several years, what's the trend?
That's a good question. Mississippi has had record state waterfowl stamp years the last 2 years, and so that really kind of surprises people because they think those haven't been just excellent duck hunting seasons. They've been, last year was pretty good after we had that timely freeze right there before Christmas. Things got pretty good for a lot of hunters, and so we heard from a lot of people. Public lands did really well, but we're seeing an increase, and that goes to the popularity, like you talked about, of waterfowl hunting and quality public lands, opportunities for people to get out there and kind of get into something that they haven't tried before.
That's really cool. What's interesting, I'm from coastal Mississippi and have been hunting in the Delta for many, many years, and hunting all over Mississippi for most of my life. But for me, a good duck hunting trip might be that we have 3, 4, 5 good flights of ducks. We can work them in the decoys. And to me, that's just the ultimate experience. That's what duck hunting to me is all about. And then in between, visiting and enjoying the social nature of the sport, et cetera. But for someone who's around ducks a lot, that's not ducks. To have ducks is thousands of ducks. When they just come in droves, and it changes the view that you're looking at. And I've seen that before too. I know what that looks like, but. We may never see that widespread across Mississippi again, but to have a flight, a consistent flight of various species of ducks, that should be a successful duck hunt these days, shouldn't it?
It should, and really that's what we see. When we do waterfowl hunter surveys, that's what they tell us is that, it's like you said, it's the social aspect of getting out there with friends. There's a lot of good memories just in my own mind of hunts that didn't go very well as far as duck harvest, but just things that were talked about or funny things that happened. As long as they weren't dangerous things, there's a lot of good material out there for good stories and good memories. But yeah. Waterfowl harvest is important. People do want to harvest ducks, and Mississippi has held its own as far as being a consistent state as far as waterfowl harvest goes over the past few years, and we hope that'll continue. That's certainly our goal. But waterfowl hunter numbers in Mississippi continue to go up, and we hope that trend will continue, and hope to keep working hard to produce areas for them to hunt.
Well, be rest assured, Mississippi outdoorsmen, that when Houston Havens and his team get done with the winter, they don't go to Greece on vacation. They have lots of work to do still, and they continue to do it. It's been a pleasure, my friend, to visit with you this morning.
Always enjoy it. Thank you.
Yeah, this has been Houston Havens, who's head of the duck program for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. Have a great week. We'll see you next week, and stay safe in the outdoors. God bless you.
Mississippi.